I helped her fix a leak when her pipes burst. Refused payment. 2 weeks later, she filed a noise complaint about my toddler crying. When I asked why, she said, "Just doing what you didn't have the guts to do." But I found her plumbing invoice, and the address wasn't hers. I live in a quiet, older neighborhood just west of Asheville. You've probably driven past places like it and never noticed. Ranch-style houses, cracked sidewalks, chain-link fences. The kind of place where folks mow their own lawns and wave from their driveways. Not rich, not poor, just lived in. My wife and I moved here 5 years ago, before our daughter was born. We wanted a place where she could grow up safe. She just turned 2. Loud, curious, sometimes impossible. We love her more than anything. The house next door sat empty for a while, then people started coming and going. Short stays. Maybe renters. Maybe not. I kept to myself. Then this woman moved in about 6 months ago. She called herself Margot. She had this cautious way about her. Always wore long sleeves and a head wrap, even on hot days. Barely spoke, but she smiled when we passed. I figured maybe she was just private. I didn't pry. Then one freezing January morning, I saw water pouring out her front door. I was just leaving for work. I dropped everything and ran over. She answered the door in socks, completely panicked. Water was pooling across the floor. She had no idea how to shut off the main. Said she'd called someone, but they wouldn't be there for hours. I grabbed my tools and helped. Took me maybe 2 hours to get it all under control. Pipes had cracked in the wall. I capped the lines and helped her move the wet stuff outside. When it was done, she offered me money. $100 in a folded envelope. I waved it off. She seemed surprised. "You sure?" I shrugged. "It's nothing. Just glad I was here." She offered me coffee instead. I stayed for 10 minutes. Her place was sparse, barely furnished. She told me she'd come from Atlanta. Said she was trying to get away from a bad situation. I didn't ask more. I know that tone. She said thanks again, and that was that. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the town. A noise complaint. Said I was allowing excessive infant crying to disrupt the peace. I stared at it, stunned. My daughter cries, sure. But she's a toddler. We're not running a nightclub. It felt like a slap. I went out front later that day and saw Margot by her mailbox. I walked over, holding the letter. "Hey," I said. "Did you send this?" She didn't deny it. She didn't even hesitate. She looked me straight in the face and said, "Just doing what you didn't have the guts to do." I had no idea what that meant. I just stared at her. She turned and walked back inside like she hadn't just spit in my face. The next week, another complaint. This time about a broken panel in my backyard fence. One that's been there since we moved in. Now it was a hazard to neighboring children. We don't even have other kids on the block. I started to feel like I was being punished. But for what? That's when I noticed the invoice. She wasn't home. I was walking past her place and saw a folder on her porch table. I recognized the logo. It was from a local plumbing company. The same one she said she'd called the day her pipes burst. I'd assumed they came later to do repairs I couldn't. Out of curiosity, I stepped closer. The name on the invoice wasn't hers. And the address? Different house. Same street number. Different avenue. A few blocks away. I took a picture. Didn't know why. Just did. Later that night, I looked it up. The invoice was for someone named Patrice Holloway, a woman I'd never heard of. I drove by the address the next day. The house looked abandoned. I knocked anyway. Nothing. A guy across the street came out and asked if I needed something. I told him I was looking for Patrice. He laughed. She moved out months ago. Some woman's been using the place for mail. Never see her inside. Think she's crashing somewhere else. It didn't make sense. Why would Margot have a plumbing bill sent to a different name at a different house? I went home and started digging. Property records showed the house Margot was staying in belonged to a woman in Florida. It was listed on Airbnb 6 months ago, then suddenly delisted. I found a phone number and called, pretending I was interested in renting. The owner told me she stopped listing it because someone broke in, changed the locks, and pretended to be a tenant. She said she filed something with the county, but didn't want to come up from Florida to deal with it. My stomach dropped. Margot didn't rent that house. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was squatting. And somehow, she was using someone else's identity, or at least their mail, to pretend she belonged in this town. And she filed a complaint about me, something about that made my hands shake. I helped her. I let her into my home, let her talk about her divorce and her new start. I gave her hours of my time, and she turned around and spit in my face. And then made it personal. I kept looking, and the more I found, the worse it got. I started watching her more closely. Not spying, just paying attention. Her routine didn't make sense. She didn't work as far as I could tell. But she left the house every day at different times. Sometimes early, sometimes late. Always alone, always fast. No pattern. One day I followed her. I know how that sounds. But something about all this felt wrong, and I needed answers. She walked 4 blocks down, past the school, and cut into the alley behind a small white duplex.
She didn't go in.
She unlocked the side gate and disappeared into the backyard. I waited a few minutes, then walked past. That house was supposed to be empty. The county listed it as in transition, whatever that meant. The backyard was overgrown. There was an old shed in the back corner, door wide open.
I saw a plastic bin inside.
And a mattress. She was living out of both places. Maybe more. That night, I called the plumbing company on the invoice. Asked for Patrice Holloway. They said she hadn't worked with them since last summer. She was one of our rental clients, the guy said. But we haven't heard from her in months. I asked if they had a picture on file. He hesitated, then said he'd check. 10 minutes later, he emailed me a copy of the invoice with a photo ID clipped in the corner. It wasn't Patrice. It was Margot. But the ID said Patrice Holloway. She was using someone else's name. Or someone else's life. That's when I remembered what she said to me. Just doing what you didn't have the guts to do. What the hell did that mean? I dug deeper into Patrice Holloway. Real one, lived in Charleston. Still does. Mid-50s. Works for the county schools. Her Facebook's public. She posts photos of her dogs and her backyard garden. Definitely not Margot. I sent her a message. Just said, "Hi, I think someone in North Carolina might be using your name." She messaged back within an hour. "I've been dealing with weird credit stuff for months." "Are you serious?" Yeah, I was serious. I told her everything I knew. Sent the photo. She said she was calling the police. The next morning, Margot was gone. No note. No sign. Just gone. I checked the back shed. Empty. Inside the house next door, still full of her junk. But the good stuff?
Gone.
But that's not the twist. A week later, I got a letter from the county. Not a complaint. A notice. Turns out someone had reported me for unauthorized surveillance of a neighbor. And the complaint? Filed under Patrice Holloway's name. Margot, or whatever her name was, left. But she left a little gift behind. She didn't just disappear. She made sure I got burned for trying to stop her. After the letter came, I went down to the county office myself. I figured if I explained it in person, maybe someone would actually listen. The clerk at the desk didn't even look up when I said my name. "You're the one from the Holloway case?" she asked.
I said yeah.
She sighed and walked to the back, came back with a folder. "You're not the first person to bring this woman up." I asked what she meant. She looked around, leaned in, and said, "She's been reported in 2 other counties. Same pattern. Claims to rent, moves in, uses someone else's ID, files noise complaints or harassment charges when people get too close. We think she's been doing it for years." Asked if anyone was looking for her. The clerk just shook her head. No paper trail. No real name. If she's not breaking in, and she leaves before she's forced out, it's not considered a crime. I left that office feeling like I'd been hit with a truck. It wasn't personal. I wasn't special. I was just another mark in a long line of them. But something still didn't sit right. Why me? Why file that complaint? Why say that sentence? I went back through everything, texts, the picture of the invoice, her voice in my head. I even started replaying the conversation we had the morning of the leak. She said, Sometimes you just need a reset. Then, when I asked if she wanted me to call anyone for her, she got weirdly quiet. I left all that behind, she said. I don't need to be found. At the time, I thought she meant an ex. But now I wasn't sure. Then, I remembered something else. When I was fixing her pipes, I used a flashlight she handed me. It had a name engraved on the side.
Diolue.
Not Patrice.
Di.
I searched again. Found an old court case out of Atlanta, dismissed for fraud, in the name Danielle Holloway. She didn't just steal Patrice's identity. She might have been her sister, or cousin, or someone close. And that meant maybe she didn't choose my house at random. Maybe she knew who I was, or who I reminded her of. I looked up Danielle Holloway's case records. The arresting officer? My brother. He's been a cop in Atlanta for 15 years. We don't talk much anymore. Had a falling out after our mom died. But suddenly, all of this started to look different. Not random. Not a scam. Personal. And I think she knew at the moment I stepped through her door. I never saw her again. And maybe I never will. But sometimes, when my daughter cries in the middle of the night and I sit there rocking her back to sleep, I still hear that voice in my head, just doing what you didn't have the guts to do. And I wonder if she meant me or my brother. Or maybe someone else entirely. Either way, I'm not sure what scares me more, that she knew exactly who I was, or that I still don't know who she really was.